Believe it or not, the origin of the Baltimore Orioles began in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as the Milwaukee Brewers were one of 8 charter members of the newly formed American League, created by Ban Johnson in 1901. Ban Johnson, president of the American League, was former minor league president of the Western League. The Brewers played for only one season, starting on May 3rd of 1901 and ending on September 12th of that same year. In 1902, the Brewers would move to St. Louis to become the Browns, where they would play until 1954, until finally moving to Baltimore to become the Orioles. Prior to 1901 and subsequent to 1901, Milwaukee was a successful minor league city for years, ultimately receiving again a major league team in 1953, the Milwaukee Braves. The Brewers' home for one season was Lloyd Street grounds. Few photographs exist since the park was from a bygone era and only hosted a major league team for one season. This photograph, taken from beyond center field, captures baseball in Milwaukee during the utilitarian era, with its vast outfields at the turn of the century. The fence was meant to keep non-paying customers out rather than to mark a barrier for the home run ball. Babe Ruth would later transition baseball out of this dead ball era. In the utilitarian era, which runs roughly from the 19th century to 1908, ballparks were built quickly and cheaply, typically out of wood. Grandstands, like here in this picture, were covered single-deck structures, and pavilions were uncovered down the first and third baselines. Fences were enormous, sometimes measuring out to 600 feet in center field. Sometimes fans stood behind ropes in the outfield within the fence walls to watch the game. Here, as we see in this Lloyd Street grounds sketch, no bleachers were built, as shown. The grandstand circumscribed the infield, while separate seating extended down the baselines. The roof of the grandstand might have hosted officials, scorekeepers, or early photographers, but was unlikely to support paying spectators. The Brewers finished last in the American League in 1901, and shortly thereafter moved to St. Louis. Baseball at Dottier and Grand Avenue dates back to the 1860s, when a plot of land was purchased in North St. Louis in 1866. This ball field, Grand Avenue Ball Grounds, became home to the St. Louis Brown Stockings in the mid-1870s. The first wooden grandstand was constructed along the southeast corner of the park in 1881, now known as Sportsman's Park. However, in 1892, the Brown Stockings became members of the National League and moved to a new ballpark several blocks northwest. Sportsman's Park at Dottier and Grand Avenue lay dormant until 1902, when the new St. Louis Browns moved from Milwaukee into an 8,000-seat wooden ballpark with a single deck covered grandstand and diamond situated in the northwest corner of the plot of land. I put together 2 pictures from the 1908 season showing this early, modest rendition of Sportsman's Park. By the end of the decade, new steel and concrete ballparks were being built in Cincinnati, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, leading to the construction of a new modern-era ballpark in St. Louis. Concrete and steel were used to build a double-deck grandstand from first to third base, with additional seating joining the lower level and extending down the lines. The location of the playing field was shifted, with home plate moving to the southwest corner, leaving the original wooden grandstand in left field. On April 14, 1909, the Browns played their first game at the new Sportsman's Park against Cleveland. Capacity was approximately 18,000. Sportsman's Park appearance, as sketched in this drawing, would resemble the new concrete and steel looks, but prior to the further expansion looks in the 1920s. Most pictures I've looked for of old Sportsman's Park are dated later, but I did find this 1915 picture of a game between the Red Sox and Browns. The scoreboard in left field, with the single deck at the left field line, gives away that the game had to be taken place before the 1920s expansion. Now let's discuss the Browns uniforms in this early era. This 1908 jersey, shown in this watercolor depiction, is a pullover-style home jersey. The logo is an S, T, and L inside a diamond, and the patch on the shoulders is a fleur-de-lis. If you notice, there is a center belt loop, which was to secure the belt buckle off to one side. Players of this era usually wore the belt buckle to one side so they could prevent injury when sliding into a base. Now, this 1914 pullover-style home jersey features a cadet collar rather than the more formal collar of years past. The logo St. Louis lettering has also been modified. By the end of the teens, heading into the 1920s, the Browns would reach their franchise peak with young hitters like future Hall of Famer George Sisler, pictured here before a game in 1919. But the competitive baseball scene in St. Louis would change during the Roaring '20s. In 1920, the crosstown St. Louis Cardinals moved from Robeson Field to Sportsman's Park, becoming tenants with the Browns, playing their first game on July 1st, 1920. They would share Sportsman's Park for 33 years, with the Cardinals overshadowing the Browns in both wins and ballpark attendance. The first major modification took place in 1925, when the grandstands were double-decked to both foul poles, and bleachers in right field were now covered, increasing the capacity to 30,500. Fans sitting behind home plate could see the bleachers that extended around the outfield and views of the surrounding neighborhood. Members of the media also received an excellent view of the field from the press box on top of the stadium roof. Although the two teams shared the same home, the three pictures from various vantage points that display Sportsman's Park are all from the three St. Louis Cardinals World Series victories: 1926, 1931, and 1934 respectively. A huge scoreboard replaced the old smaller one in left field in 1937, fully completed for the 1938 season, towering above the left center field seats. We see that the new scoreboard, which would last until the park was demolished in 1965, held many advertisements and a conspicuous clock. Following 1938, I can typically, within reason, date the pictures based on the look of this scoreboard. This illustration depicts the Browns road jersey in 1938. Typically, you can tell if a jersey is a home uniform or road jersey by the color and the lettering. If it's a darker color, it's most likely a road team, and if it says the team nickname as opposed to the team's city, it's probably a home uniform. This patch on the left sleeve was commissioned by Donald L. Barnes, the owner of the Browns, for a team design. The winning design belonged to Miss Helen Severs of St. Louis. It is an equestrian figure that stands atop a baseball that has Browns written on it. The shield is made up of stars and stripes, 9 stripes to be exact, the same number of players that take the field for each game. During this time period in 1944, while America was at war, the question was raised, should able-bodied athletes of baseball be fighting for their country overseas? The Commissioner of Baseball and the President of the United States discussed the game's role in the war. Both agreed that baseball was too important to the people. It would boost the morale of the entire country and take their minds off of the war effort for a short time. Wartime sleeve patches were worn by all levels of professional baseball teams. The health patch was worn only for the 1942 season, part of a health and fitness awareness campaign. The Stars and Stripes patch, as shown on the left sleeve of this home jersey, was worn from 1943 to 1945. It took World War II and the conscription of many star players from other teams to give the Browns their first shot at the World Series, against none other than their National League counterparts and Sportsman's Park cohabitants, the Cardinals. In this 1944 World Series, that never left the same ballpark, Sportsman's Park, the Browns went up 2-1, only to lose 3 straight, giving the Cardinals another championship. This was the only American League pennant the Browns would ever claim. In these wartime pictures at Sportsman's Park, the first in 1942, the second post-war in 1946, light towers rise above the stadium to provide the ability for baseball to be played during the evenings. Night games would boost attendance, still reeling from the economic depression a decade earlier. The first night game under the lights at Sportsman's Park was back on May 24, 1940, ushering in a new era to watch Major League Baseball. As Sportsman's Park evolved in the early 1950s, an iconic long-irons clock sat atop the scoreboard, having replaced the circular one from Hunter Bacon in 1949. Hence, this aerial photograph of Sportsman's Park must have been taken between 49 and 53, since the square silhouette of the clock is apparent, and prior to the park sale to the Cardinals and Anheuser-Busch, which placed an eagle atop the scoreboard. The Browns' final years in St. Louis at Sportsman's Park were memorable, but not for having winning teams. Quite the contrary. Bill Veeck, who bought the St. Louis Browns in 1951, was quite the showman, holding various publicity stunts as the owner. One such stunt, Grandstand Manager's Day, enabled the crowd to participate in the game and vote on various in-game strategic decisions, like to steal or bunt or to change pitchers, by fans holding up placards. Ironically, the Browns won 5-3, snapping a 4-game losing streak. Veeck's most memorable stunt occurred when he sent Eddie Goodell to pinch hit in the bottom of the first inning of a doubleheader on August 19, 1951. Wearing the number 1/8 on his uniform, Goodell, who stood 3 feet 7 inches tall and is the shortest person ever to appear in a Major League Baseball game, walked on 4 straight pitches and then was pulled for a pinch runner. After the 1952 season, Veeck suggested that American League ball clubs share radio and television revenue with visiting clubs, a proposal anathema to the powerful Yankees, whose broadcasting revenues dwarfed those of all the other AL franchises. Outvoted, he refused to allow the Browns' opponents to broadcast games played against his team on the road. The league responded by eliminating the lucrative Friday night games in St. Louis. This Browns home jersey is a prime example of no frills, with the exception of the Brownie face patch on the left sleeve, which was worn in the 1952 and 1953 seasons. In '53, the Browns began with a bang, with Bobo Holloman pitching a no-hitter on May 6th in his first Major League start. But as the year progressed, the tone would sour. Cardinals owner Fred Say was convicted of tax evasion. Facing certain banishment from baseball, he was forced to put the Cardinals up for sale. At first, the only credible offers came from out-of-town interests, and it appeared that Veeck would succeed in driving the Cardinals out of town. However, just as Say was about to sell the Cardinals to interests who would have moved them to Houston, Texas, he instead accepted a much lower bid from St. Louis-based brewing giant Anheuser-Busch. In the end, the Browns season finished with the team being sold to Baltimore interests in September. The Cardinals would stay, but the Browns would move to Baltimore, thus concluding the tenure and history of the St. Louis Browns. Baltimore Municipal Stadium in the northeast part of the city, in the Waverly neighborhood, was built in 1922 as a football stadium, but became the home to the minor league Orioles in the summer of 1944. The minor league Baltimore Orioles franchise was very popular and drew huge crowds as they went on to win the International League Championship that season. In 1944, the mayor announced plans to either renovate Municipal Stadium or build a new stadium. In 1947, voters approved a $2.5 million measure to rebuild Municipal Stadium. The entire stadium was rebuilt beginning in 1949 and completed a year later. The original grandstand was enclosed on the north side but rebuilt, with the main grandstand constructed on the south side of the site. The International League's Orioles played their first game at the new stadium on April 20, 1950. Named in honor of soldiers who had died during World Wars I and II, Memorial Stadium had original seating capacity of 31,000 that consisted of a single-tier grandstand. Hoping to lure an MLB franchise, the city added an upper deck to Memorial Stadium, increasing its capacity to 47,000. Here is an early aerial view of Memorial Stadium with a second deck complete, with the iconic inscribed entrance wall yet to be completed. Major League Baseball returned to Baltimore after over half-century hiatus in 1954, when the Browns moved from St. Louis, becoming the Orioles, a team name long associated with the city of Baltimore. In fact, the New York Yankees franchise started out as the Baltimore Orioles in 1901, before moving to New York for the 1903 season. The team played their first game at Memorial Stadium on April 15, 1954. Memorial Stadium featured 2 primary seating decks, the lower and upper decks that stretched from behind home plate and in a horseshoe shape down the first and third baselines. The lower decks extended into the outfield. Outside, the facade was a reddish-brown brick, and the home plate entrance had a tall concrete wall bearing an inscription honoring the city's war dead. Local Baltimore brewery giant Gunther Brewing Company sponsored the main scoreboard in right center field, the largest electrical scoreboard in the world in 1954. The scoreboard look, design, and even location placement will be key in identifying each era of Memorial Stadium for the next few decades. 1956 was the first year the Orioles replaced the team name on their road uniforms with Baltimore. Notice the zipper on this road jersey. During the 40s, 50s, and 60s, many teams used zipper jerseys instead of the more traditional button front jerseys, while a handful of teams even wore them well into the 70s and maybe even into the 80s. The patch on this left sleeve of this jersey is a caricature of an Oriole wearing a ball cap. Memorial Stadium was a great place to watch baseball, but a terrible place to watch football. It had served as the home of the NFL's Baltimore Colts from 1953 until '83 before they moved to Indianapolis. Not only were quality seats missing in one end zone, but along with the obstructed seating, the horseshoe shape of the stadium was terrible for football because the 40-50 yard line seats actually took fans away from the field. A hedge initially served as the center field fence, but was shortly replaced by a wire fence. During the 1960 season, the hedge was placed close behind the center field area, which appears in that year's picture backdrop. Also that season, the Milwaukee-based Ham Brewing Company bought advertising rights to the Gunther scoreboard, changing the look for the early 60s. Memorial Stadium underwent several expansions and changes during its existence. By 1961, 2,600 field box seats and new dugouts were constructed at Memorial Stadium, increasing the capacity to 49,000. The bullpens were moved from down the first base lines and third base lines to behind the outfield fence. Notice the difference between this 1954 aerial photo and this photo from 1961. By 1964, the upper deck was lengthened, with two sections adding at both ends of the horseshoe. The seating capacity was increased to 54,000 for baseball, 65,000 for football. And notice the additional light towers on the edges built for the lengthened upper decks. Also, if you compare this 1959 photograph at home plate with Elston Howard of the Yankees sliding to the catcher, or this 1962 aerial photograph, albeit with the Ham scoreboard, the horseshoe extension had not been built yet. In this 1966 aerial video, the curvature had extended past the foul lines to seat additional spectators. Which brings us to the 1966 season. One could argue that the heyday of the Baltimore Orioles was between 1966 and 1983. 1966 saw the strength of star Frank Robinson winning the Triple Crown feat. The Orioles took the American League pennant and stormed into the World Series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. This would be the franchise's second trip to the World Series, the first as the Browns losing to the Cardinals in 1944. In a series that featured many great pitchers and future Hall of Famers, the Orioles swept the Dodgers in 4 straight. Los Angeles' Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale were no match for the Orioles' Jim Palmer and Dave McNally and Wally Buckner. The Dodgers scored only 2 runs in Baltimore's 5 in Game 1, and didn't score another in the series. In Game 2, 21-year-old Palmer allowed only 4 hits in a 6-0 win. 2 days later, Game 3 starter Buckner, a fellow young gun, threw a 3-hit shutout to win 1-0. After Frank Robinson's homer in the 4th inning of Game 4, Dave McNally shut out the bewildered Dodgers, giving the Orioles their first World Series title and Frank Robinson the series' Most Valuable Player award. Schaefer beer ads replaced Ham in 1966 until the right field scoreboard was taken down after the 1970 season. In these photographs, different variations of the advertisement beer appear on the board. Here, the Stein in this aerial 1966 photo, the bottle in this 1967 seasonal game between the visiting Detroit Tigers and the Orioles, and finally the multiple 3 beer glasses of Schaefer's display during a 1969 game between Baltimore and the Red Sox. With the exception of the wire windows in where the entire bullpens could be observed, by 1969 the wall had been padded, in time for the Orioles to make another run. After advancing past the Twins in the new American League Championship Series, the Orioles fell short to the Cinderella New York Mets 4-1. But the Orioles made it back to the championship for the second year in a row in 1970. They faced Cincinnati's young Big Red Machine and defeated them 4-1. Brooks Robinson was the force behind the Orioles' wins, batting .429 with 2 home runs and collecting 9 hits for the series. As well, his 4 hits in one game tied the single game record, and his 17 total bases set a new series record, making him the World Series MVP. Pitcher Dave McNally also hit a grand slam, the first ever by a pitcher in the World Series. It is important to note that the 1969 through 1971 Orioles have to be considered one of the best baseball teams in history. They are one of only 4 teams in baseball history to win 100 games 3 years in a row. The road jersey we feature in 1970 has little change from the set of 1966 uniforms displayed earlier. In 1970, a digital scoreboard replaced the original Gunther scoreboard and was placed in left center field. There's a brief time like this one against the Twins in the 1970 ALCS where you can see both scoreboards, one being built and the other almost knocked down. In addition to the scoreboard advancements, wooden benches that covered the entire second deck were replaced by chairs and metal benches. This photograph, illustrating the outfield wall in the 1971 World Series against Pittsburgh, illustrates the completed digital scoreboard in left center, which would last until the park was demolished. The Orioles accomplished a most remarkable and noteworthy feat in 1971, never to be repeated, in that their starting rotation had 4 20-game winners on the same team. In 1972, the famous Charge slogan is displayed on the newest scoreboard. The Orioles had success throughout the 70s, also winning their new Eastern Division in 1973 and 1974. The third uniform, or alternate uniform, like this Orioles one from 1976, was worn by some Major League Baseball teams, partly to break up the monotony of having just 2 to choose from, and partly to sell more jerseys. The Orioles' third uniform is a double knit style that most of the other teams succumbed to during the 70s and early 80s. It was a pullover style made of synthetic material. The pants were called Sansa belt because the elastic material of the waistline eliminated the need for a belt. By this era in the late 70s, National Bohemian Beer sponsored the scoreboard advertisements, as the Orioles continued their success. In 1979, the Orioles won their 5th American League pennant, advanced past the Angels, but succumbed again to Willie Stargell and the Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series. By the early 1980s, Bush lit up the left field scoreboard. These pictures were from various day and night games in 1982. By 1983, the Orioles had almost dropped the double knit uniform of the 70s and had reverted back to a more classic style uniform with button-down jerseys. We say almost because for some reason they hung on to the double knit pants with a Sansa belt waistline. Also in 1983, in what would be called the I-95 series, Baltimore faced Philadelphia and won their 3rd World Series title, with Orioles slugger Eddie Murray blasting 2 homers in Game 5, and starting pitcher Scott McGregor, who took the loss in Game 1, turned around to pitch a shutout, giving Baltimore again its 3rd championship. But the early 1980s saw the beginning of one of the most remarkable streaks in all of baseball, started by a young shortstop who refused to take a day off. Although the 1980s would see the team play up and down baseball, the one constant was Cal Ripken turning double plays from short. The remainder of the decade saw the Orioles' performance on the field dip. Memorial Stadium was still a special place to watch the Birds play, but began to show its age. The stadium hadn't changed significantly through the decades, as we see from this aerial sketch. The sketch predates the second Diamond Vision video board, which was added in right center field in 1985 and cost approximately $3 million. The O's were trying to draw from some special moxie of the past to lift them into the modern era. In this photograph, taken in 1985, as we can see from the Diamond Vision board in the background, features Earl Weaver, past his prime, from the glory days of Oriole lore, and Jim Palmer, now serving as a retired broadcaster, interviewing his old manager. We see in these following late 1980s photographs both backdrop scoreboards featured. The older scoreboard now displaying a Toyota advertisement, while the newer video board displaying ballpark staples from the 80s, Winston cigarettes, Budweiser beer, and Coca-Cola. This photograph is from 1986. While this photograph, taken by ex-pitcher Jerry Royce in 1988, shows how Memorial Stadium offered beautiful views of the landscape and neighborhood beyond the open end of the stadium. Also notice how the ad designs reflect the particular era of this signature logos being changed. In 1988, a dubious year for the O's on the field as they would set a record for consecutive losses to start the season, the Orioles announced plans to build a new ballpark in downtown Baltimore. This new ballpark would set the standard and usher in a whole new era of retro-modern designs across baseball that would reinvigorate the sport and remind patrons of the old nostalgia of the ball field. Through the final years of Memorial Stadium, though they would be lean for the Orioles, 1989 saw them turn around their fortunes and contend for the Eastern Division title. However, they fell to the Blue Jays on the last weekend of the season to come in second in the division. 1991 would be the last season the Orioles would play at Memorial Stadium. Though the Orioles would not contend for a division title this season, Cal Ripken Jr. had a career year, hitting .323 with 34 home runs and 144 RBIs, winning the American League MVP, All-Star Game MVP, and Major League Player of the Year honors. In a season where players and fans said farewell to their beloved home since 1954, their uniforms go back to a clean, classic look, with no piping or stripes on this home uniform. Beginning in 1989, the O's reintroduced the swoosh under the front of the jersey lettering, a style used in the 50s and 70s. On October 6, 1991, a sellout crowd saw the Orioles fall to Detroit in the last game at Memorial Stadium. The following season, the team moved downtown into Camden Yards and would begin a new era in their second ballpark in Baltimore. On April 6, 1992, Camden Yards hosted its first game, with the Baltimore Orioles facing off against the Cleveland Indians. The ballpark's facade, made of bricks with arches, helped it blend into the downtown landscape, giving the impression that the ballpark had been part of the city for decades. The low-raked upper deck ensures the stadium doesn't overpower the surrounding buildings, while the majority of fans entering through the iconic Utah Street entrance in center field. This street, once a major thoroughfare leading into the city, now serves as a lively gathering space between the seating area and the historic B&O warehouse. One of Camden Yards' most iconic features is this warehouse, an 8-story building behind the right field wall. Built in 1899 for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, it now houses offices, suites, and other spaces for the Orioles. The warehouse serves as a striking backdrop for the ballpark and has become a symbol of Camden Yards' integration of modern design with historic elements. The site chosen for Camden Yards was particularly significant, as it sat on land once occupied by the saloon of Babe Ruth's father. To design the new ballpark, Orioles owner Eli Jacobs hired Joseph Sphere of HOK Sport, who was tasked with creating a stadium that would integrate seamlessly into the fabric of the city while maintaining the charm of early 1900s ballparks. The result was Camden Yards, a facility that would forever change the way baseball stadiums were designed. While Camden Yards sparked a renaissance in ballpark design, 1994 was a low point for baseball. No World Series took place due to a labor disruption of play in August. This was the only time since 1904 that a World Series was not played. The league featured the 125th anniversary of professional baseball, as shown on this third uniform, a pullover style with 2 buttons on the top, and a commemorative patch on the right sleeve with the Major League Baseball logo and 125th anniversary on it. When play finally resumed the next season, one of the greatest records in baseball would fall to an Oriole. On September 6, 1995, Cal Ripken Jr. became baseball's new Iron Man by playing in his 2,131st consecutive game, overtaking Lou Gehrig's old mark, which was long thought to be one of sport's unbreakable records. Camden Yards in its early years featured an iconic Maryland State Lottery Hit It Here sign, as shown in this 1995 photograph. By 1996, the sign was removed to present a clean green wall in right center field. The Orioles built some powerful teams in the late 90s, making the ALCS in 1996, shown here in a divisional game against Cleveland with Roberto Alomar coming up bat on deck. Then again, they made the ALCS in 1997, this time as Eastern Division winners. The Orioles were highly favored in '97 against the Cleveland Indians. Unfortunately, it was the Tribe that had the last word, putting the Birds away in a tight 6-game series to take the AL pennant. The lettering on the front of the Orioles' home uniform is predominantly black, while the jersey itself has black piping around the neck and down the front in this 1997 jersey picture. The patch on the left sleeve shows the reinvented Oriole logo introduced in 1992 atop the city commemorating their 200th anniversary. As the Orioles headed into a new millennium, Camden Yards continued to be the flagship stadium throughout Major League Baseball. Many teams would attempt to replicate the success of Camden Yards by building retro modern stadiums in the 90s and 2000s, typically utilizing brick and steel materials that were often employed in the early 20th century ballparks. Yet modern amenities were also utilized to make each ballpark cutting edge and blend the two design choices. The central location and fan experience at Camden Yards set a new standard for ballparks. The main concourse, with large open-air walkways, provides fans with easy access to food, beverages, and interactive experiences. The old green seating reflects the charm of bygone ballparks, like these classic photographs, the earlier one of a night game in 2000, and the second one I photographed myself at a game in 2002. This 2004 Orioles home white uniform continues the clean, classic look reintroduced in the early 90s. This uniform does feature some slight changes from earlier eras. Gone is the black detailing that outlined the collar and the button piping. Also, please make note of the patch on the left shoulder, which celebrates the 50th anniversary of the Orioles' arrival in Baltimore from St. Louis. By 2005, the Orioles had fallen away from their winning ways, having had losing records for their past 8 seasons, firing managers abruptly and paying big salaries for high-priced hitters while their pitching suffered. In this 2007 Camden Yards photograph, construction begins beyond the confines on a hotel which would overlook the ballpark from the skyline. The late 2000s and early 2010s saw a shift from the retro-themed design and rather embraced new digital technologies, including high-definition video and ribbon boards. Here, a new video board replaced the digital scoreboard in right center in 2009, which beyond left center, the new Hilton Hotel was completed, dominating the landscape backdrop. Originally, the stadium had a capacity of 48,000, but in 2011, all seats were replaced with larger, more comfortable ones, reducing the capacity to near 46,000. New high-definition scoreboards popped up all throughout the park, as did the orange umbrellas in the outfield patios. Fans can enjoy the game from multiple vantage points, including areas beyond the out-of-town scoreboard in right field, and a section overlooking the bullpens in left center field. A grassy picnic area beyond center field offers a relaxed setting with flower gardens and shady trees. Statues of 6 Oriole Hall of Famers, Frank Robinson, Earl Weaver, Jim Palmer, Eddie Murray, Cal Ripken, and Brooks Robinson, were added in 2012 to further celebrate the team's rich history. The photograph behind home plate was taken by myself in 2014. By 2014, the Orioles surprised everyone by winning the American League East Division, making their way to the ALCS before being swept by the Royals. The Orioles had embraced the cartoonish Oriole bird back as a logo, and by the 2010s, market sales demanded multiple uniforms to be worn, including this retro orange jersey. This photograph, taken by myself in 2015, shows how Camden Yards has adapted to the new millennium. A new roof deck adds an additional vantage point to take in a game. By the end of the decade, the Orioles began rebuilding again. However, today, their young cast of talent, like stud new age shortstop Gunnar Henderson, looks to bring championships back to Baltimore. In 2022, the Orioles completed a $3.5 million renovation to alter the ballpark's outfield dimensions. In an effort to reduce the number of home runs, the left field wall was pushed back nearly 27 feet, and its height was increased to 13 feet. Additionally, 1,000 seats were removed from left field to accommodate the changes. Compare the previous 2022 photo I took with this 2018 photograph. The modification drew mixed reviews from fans and players alike. Again, before the start of the 2025 season, the Orioles altered the dimensions again in left field, moving the wall in at varying distances and lowering it in some areas. Though Camden Yards is now over 30 years old, the ballpark has stood as a model of how to blend the old with the new, and its influence is obvious. It remains a true fan favorite and continues to be an integral part of the Orioles' identity and in the Baltimore community. Looking towards the future, the Orioles will be investing a substantial amount of money to renovate Camden Yards and make it the best it can be.
Something magic happens every time you go. You make the magic happen, the magic of Orioles baseball. When the game is close and the O's are hot, there's a thundering roar from 34 to give it all they got. And you never know who's gonna hear the call. Every game there's a different star. That's the magic of Orioles baseball. Orioles magic, feel it happen. Orioles magic, feel it happen. O-R-I-O-L-E-S. Magic, 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 magic. Something magic happens every time you go. Score the runs. Nothing could be more exciting. Nothing could be more fun. There's a love affair between you and the team. You're the reason we win when we win, and you know what the magic means. Orioles magic, feel it happen. 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 O-R-I-O-L-E-S. Magic, 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 magic. Orioles magic, feel it happen. Magic, 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 magic. Something magic happened